If there's one thing that white makeup does really well is highlighting just how yellow your teeth are. I take such good care of my teeth. I don't have any fillings. Anyway, I look like this because I just spent a lot of time putting this on for a vampire video I just made, which is probably up by now. I probably put that one up first, so go watch it. And since I spent a lot of time on this makeup, I'm keeping it on. After this, I'm gonna go get lunch at a cafe. I'm not taking it off. A few weeks ago, I made a video about modern horror novels that were not written by Stephen King. And since then, I've read a whole bunch more. Or I remembered ones that I had read previously and I wanted to mention them. So here they are. Some more great horror novels written fairly recently that are not by Stephen King or Joe Hill. First up is this. Oh my goodness, I read this recently and I loved it to bits. This is called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. He's an American horror writer, and these are 3 of his stories. The first one is the titular Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which comprises 150 pages and is entirely epistolary. It is written as a series of emails back and forth between 2 women, as well as some instant messages. It is set a few years ago, I think maybe around the year 2000, and we begin with a woman who is struggling to pay her rent. She is struggling with her finances, and so she is selling online a family antique, an heirloom. I think it's an apple peeler. And another woman says, "Hey, I'll buy that off you, here's the money." And then they get to talking, and she explains that she's struggling with her finances, and so the other woman says, "No, keep your apple peeler. I'll pay your rent, but there's something I want in return." And they basically enter into a very unhealthy and dangerous dominant and submissive relationship, all digitally. They don't meet in person, but the woman who is paying the rent gets the other woman to sign a contract that says that she will do whatever the dominant woman says. And it gets dark and frightening and twisted and scary. The second story is set in a world where scientists have just somehow definitively proven that there is no afterlife. Death is the end, that's it. And we begin with a boy who is building a giant crucifix in his bedroom. His parents are downstairs sorting out some divorce papers, and he crucifies himself. And his suicide note says, "I hope you two will stay together after this." And so, now that he's dead, they value and respect his wishes and they stay together. And then over Christmas, they do a shining. They go to this hotel that's closed for the winter to look after it and be its caretakers. And that's where the story really kicks off and gets really dark and twisted and strange, and I won't tell you any more. And then the third story is only 20 pages, and it's about a young man who goes to his neighbor's house because he found a piece of bone in his yard with his neighbor's initials on it. And his neighbor wrangles him into doing a bunch of weird dares for money. The dares are increasingly dangerous, and the money increases in value every time. It's very, very short and very, very weird. And I enjoyed all 3 of these stories. The first one, the titular Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, being my favorite of the 3. Next up is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. Spent a long time thinking this was Needle Street, and it's not. I can read. I read for a job. Anywho, this is a horror thriller. It blends the genres of horror and thriller together, as that name suggests. We begin with a man called Ted recounting the fact that it's been 11 years to the day since a young girl in a nearby lake close to his house went missing, and he was the prime suspect. Police raided his house, thought he must have done it, couldn't find any evidence, and so he was cleared of all charges. But she is only one of many girls who have gone missing at that lakeside. 11 years have passed since then. Ted is a recluse. He's boarded up his windows. He doesn't really leave the house, but he does have a cat called Olivia and a daughter called Lauren, who is only periodically at his house, so we assume she has a mother that she mainly lives with and comes to stay with Ted on the weekends. But none of this quite adds up, and there are a lot of holes in this logic, because we never hear about a mother at all. When Lauren leaves the house, we don't really know where she goes. Lauren and the cat Olivia don't like each other. And there's also a woman called Dee, whose little sister is one of the girls that went missing at the lakeside. We're following her as she continues 10 years later to investigate what happened and follow a trail and believe that her sister is still alive, while dealing with the guilt that it's kind of her fault her sister went missing, or was kidnapped, or was killed. And eventually this all leads her back to Ted, and she moves into Needless Street, and the 2 of them kind of get to know each other, and she believes that Ted really did do it. And of course we're led to think that maybe Lauren, his daughter, is actually one of the kidnapped girls, and he kidnapped her, and turned her into his daughter. But all of this just seems too obvious. That doesn't feel like a thriller. And this book manages to wrong-foot you again and again. It is pseudo-gothic, there are moments of genuine gore and body horror, and it's also just full of creeping dread and mind games. It confuses you, it gaslights you, it frightens you. It's a very effective horror-thriller mix, and yeah, I was genuinely confused. I've done a full video on it, you can go watch that for more. But I really, really enjoyed this book, and I've got her next book ready to go as well. This is my favourite novel of 2022. I cannot see anything beating it at this point. This is Orpheus Builds a Girl by Heather Parry. A few days ago, at the time of recording, I was lucky enough to go see Heather, chat with her. She and I knew each other through social media. We'd known each other through Twitter for a long time, but I finally got to meet her in person, congratulate her on writing my favourite book of the whole year. It was an amazing event where she was interviewed by Julia Armfield, who wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, an awesome modern gothic novel, my second favourite book of the year, I think. It was an amazing event for those reasons, and my god, I was so lucky to get to meet Heather. Her mind is incredible. This is an amazing piece of true gothic terror. It is very, very Frankenstein in its tone, its character writing, its general vibes. It's hard to pin down the fact that the language and the characters and the events all just feel like Frankenstein. But it is also based on a real event. Heather Parry was listening to a podcast, I think This American Life, I think she said, and in that she learned about a man who treated a girl who had TB, and she died in his care, and he, several months or a year later, dug up her body and kept it in his house for 7 years because he was in love with her and wanted to marry her. And Heather takes that story and turns it into something very gothic and dark, but she adds a feminist twist to it because she was upset by this story. People were calling it romantic, and Heather thought, how dare you, there's nothing romantic here. And so she rewrites that narrative in a sense, corrects it, by having that doctor be one of the protagonists and the other be the sister of the girl who dies of TB. And we follow these dual narratives. We follow his life and her life, and eventually about halfway through they start to tangle together. This is supreme gothic horror. It is nasty, it is full of body horror, it is tense, it fills you with hatred and anger and pain and misery. It is putrid, and it is gorgeous for all of those reasons. This is a wonderfully tense, classical gothic horror story, and I urge everyone to read Orpheus Builds a Girl. This is a perfect gothic horror novel. This is one of my favourite comic books ever. It is a collection of, I think, 5 short stories by Emily Carroll called Through the Woods. Not to be confused with the musical Into the Woods. These 5 stories are also very, very gothic. What I like about them is that they don't offer you any explanation. Each one is a terrifying scenario that will really stick with you, especially the first one. I still remember the first one very intimately. They're beautifully drawn, and they don't really ever end in a satisfying way. They're very open, and I really appreciate that. You don't really get any sense of catharsis from these stories, and I find that a very bold move on the author's part. Also, just look at it. It's absolutely stunning. The art is sparse, kind of punk and scratchy, but there are so many massive pages of just whiteness or emptiness or a sheer colour background with something frightening in the foreground. It's very intense. But look at the way the art tells the story, tells the narrative, and fluidly melds with the dialogue and the events, and it's really fantastically well drawn. And these stories are imaginative and gothic. They remind you of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe, even H.P. Lovecraft. They're strange and wonderful, and if you love comic books, if you love horror, if you love the gothic, you need to check out Through the Woods. At the time this video goes out, I will already have done a review of this. But as things stand right now, that review doesn't exist. I'm going to film it tomorrow because I have about 100 pages left of this book. This is Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. It is a colossal 700-plus page novel by a legendary Argentinian writer, translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. It's interesting that everything I've read of Mariana Enriquez's so far has been collections of short stories. So we've gone from lots and lots of short stories to a massive, oversized novel. And I've read nothing in between, nothing 200 or 300 pages. We've gone from 20-page short stories to a 700-page epic. Because of its length, this is a novel that gets to explore a lot of its inspiration. It's a book that reminds you of the works of H.P. Lovecraft. It will remind you of Stephen King. It will remind you of a lot of things, but it's also a wholly original and very political novel. It tells the story of a very powerful cult who are able to summon this demonic, godly entity that helps them guarantee and hold on to their power and their money and their privilege. And the medium that they use to summon this is our protagonist, a man called Juan, who ends up marrying a member of that cult and having a child with her called Gaspar. And Juan spends the novel trying to keep Gaspar safe. Where did the son go? Oh well, that seems appropriate. I'm a vampire, I should be happier with this. But this is a novel that also is traced across the 70s, 80s and 90s in Argentina, a time of martial law, of military dictatorship. And that feeds into the novel, as does colonialism, as does empire, as does privilege, as does class. This is a novel about generational trauma, it's a family saga, but it's also very poignantly about power and wealth and colonialism. It twists the concept of the Lovecraftian on its head and makes it political in a very different way to what Lovecraft was doing. This is a genius piece of horror fiction that is so much more than the sum of its parts. A genuine masterpiece of horror. Please check out Our Share of Night. Please, 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 please. Finally, I'm going to end with a comic book that I forgot that I owned. I dug this up recently. I bought this 10 years ago, and I actually haven't read it since I bought it. But when I saw it, I thought, oh yeah, this really shook me when I read it. This is by Scott Snyder, who wrote a fantastic run on Batman. He wrote American Vampire. He wrote Witches. These are all really great books. And Severed is a mini-series of 7 issues, I think, drawn by Attila Futaki, who I'm pretty sure I only know from this. And Severed tells the story of a boy in 1916, I think, who decides to leave his really nice home to go search for his birth father. He's a horrible little kid. And he does the hitchhiking thing, the hopping on a train thing. He is journeying across the United States trying to find his dad, all the while being hunted by a cannibalistic, monstrous thing. And the book begins with a framing device where we meet this boy when he's an old man, and he only has one arm, and we know he loses that arm during this story. So we know he survives, we know he loses an arm, and we know we get to look forward to seeing all of that as it happens. Severed is a lot of fun. It is Scott Snyder really flexing his horror muscles, and he's already established himself as an amazing writer of horror, of supernatural stories, and of Americana. This and American Vampire are really books that pay homage to Americana, to the American legacy, to the American dream, and also to the supernatural, to vampires and monsters and witches and werewolves and things that go bump in the night. And he also wrote my favourite run on Batman ever. But Severed is a book of his that doesn't get enough attention, and I really recommend it. Okay, there were 6 more modern horror things not written by Stephen King. Comics and novels. I love all of these so much. Please check them out and go watch my original video and my vampire video and the videos where I've talked about these books more in length. And join my Patreon if you like what I do and if you want to see me in more ridiculous monster makeup. This was fun. Subscribe for books.